two, one, two, three.
Hello and welcome to Ithaca DSA Presents. I'm Theresa Alt. I'm here today with Jorge DeFendini, who is now the coordinator of CUSLAR. CUSLAR is an organization that has been around for more than 50 years. So it existed long before I lived in Ithaca, and probably before you were born. But I think the most basic fact that we need is CUSLAR, spelled in all capital letters, CUSLAR. What does that stand for?
CUSLAR is a nonprofit, and our acronym stands for Committee on U.S. Latin American Relations. So we're a nonprofit based in Ithaca that works closely with Cornell University and Ithaca College. And we have a lot of our focus on political education and advocacy, focused on regional solidarity between the United States, Latin America, and talking about the issues that come up between our two parts of the Western Hemisphere.
Yes, and in my experience, the other great aspect of CUSLAR is that it involves not just campus or campuses, but also the community. It's very open to participation by Tompkins County community participants.
Yeah, that's very true. We have done a really good job in our many decades here in Ithaca and in Tompkins County to sort of come off the hill, so to speak, with having many of our board members not just be affiliated with Cornell or Ithaca College, but be local residents who are active in the civil society or just the social engagements throughout Ithaca and Tompkins County. I know that we've developed good relationships with people who have come here seeking asylum, seeking sanctuary. We've also provided a language program for people throughout Ithaca and Tompkins County to learn and practice their Spanish. And so we've definitely become more, we are definitely more than just a student organization at Cornell or Ithaca College. We are a community organization.
And that's great, but there isn't a language requirement. I know you don't have to know Spanish to participate because I have been welcomed there and I know very little Spanish.
I mean, I was speaking for myself, as a proud no sabo Latino, I'd be in quite some trouble with the lack of Spanish that I possess if that was a requirement. So you're right, Teresa. It's open for everybody who wants to participate, whether you're an expert or just interested in what's happening with the United States and Latin America.
My memories of CUSLAR go back probably only to the 1980s. I think maybe we should say it's an organization that has been through different phases and had a different character at different times.
Mhm.
At times more cultural, at times more activist.
Mhm.
The 1980s were certainly a period of activism. This is when this is when the US government was funding all sorts of violence in various, particularly Central American countries. Um, and people were going and visiting Nicaragua all
Mhm.
the time.
Yep.
Lots of people went. In fact, I remember somebody, I wasn't there, but somebody telling me about a meeting where some, US government official type came and kind of grandly said, wants to devastate everybody. How many of you have visited Nicaragua, have actually been in Nicaragua? And like more than half the room said had
Right.
been there.
Hmm.
And it kind of completely deflated him. His whole strategy
Right.
collapsed.
Right.
Um, so what else? But there have been other times when the approach was more cultural.
Yeah. I mean, I can speak really briefly to I've had the pleasure of doing my history and catching up on a lot of what has made CUSLAR very renowned and respected throughout our community and well known. And one of our board members, Mary Jo Dudley, is one of those folks who you described as being one of the fearless CUSLAristas who had gone to Nicaragua during these times. And there's been a lot of advocacy that is tied to CUSLAR. I knew that when I came into the position, as you had mentioned, Theresa, there have been people who have taken different approaches to the type of programming and the nature of work that CUSLAR does. For me, I was very interested during my time when I was at Cornell University as an undergrad. I had navigated between cultural spaces for Latinx students, but also political spaces for people interested in advocacy and organizing. And I found those to be very two distinct, siloed
Mhm.
places to be. The political scene was predominantly white, and the Latinx scene was not too interested in politics so much as professional and career development, with a little bit of socializing sprinkled in. And so to, now come into this position as the coordinator for CUSLAR and see that there is potential to sort of create this middle ground for folks who are interested in that type of advocacy that made CUSLAR so famous in the 70s and 80s for students who have that interest now. It's a really exciting opportunity that makes me really joyous and hopeful for what next year has in store.
So we can look forward again to an activist Kuslar. And you mentioned Mary Jo Dudley, who was certainly, I mean, she was for quite a while the coordinator.
Mhm.
And yeah, I could say those are big shoes to fill. I mean, actually, you mentioned her going to Nicaragua. My first memories involved her going to El Salvador
Mhm.
and, facing death squads there.
Right. Mhm.
Because that was another U.S. U.S. sponsored, let's say, intervention. Let's see. And also the old activist, something to edit out, the old activist Kuslar,
Mhm.
uh, of course, well, both you and I are members of Ithaca DSA. And the old activist Kuslar had a very close relationship with DSA, with people who were, leading leaders in both organizations.
Mhm.
And in fact, I remember a time when there was a principal in Ithaca DSA. If Kuslar asks for something, let's say to use your mailing list or something, don't put it to a vote. Just say yes.
Well, I hope you guys will grant us that same grace for the coming years, because I certainly will be taking you up on it. And I am very interested in renewing that special relationship between CUSLAR and Ithaca DSA during my time as coordinator with CUSLAR. Up in my office in Annabelle Taylor Hall, my Salvador Allende portrait hangs right next to a New York City DSA propaganda piece on abolishing ICE. So, at least in my mind, that relationship is very strong, and I'm hoping in practice that we'll be able to, really put some material weight behind the relationship because, as you and I know, the goal of DSA is, with socialism in our lifetime is to, bring, common understanding and solidarity with one another, regardless of nation state. So I think it's very interlinked with CUSLAR's mission of regional solidarity in that regard.
And well, we've talked a bit about the past now. Um, and I think maybe a very essential point. So let's get to it right now before we
Mhm.
forget.
Yeah.
How does somebody get in touch with CUSLAR?
Yeah. That's a very good question. As of right now, if you are interested in getting involved with CUSLAR, the best way to do that is to just email me, the CUSLAR coordinator, and you can use my Cornell email. That's GAD83 at cornell.edu. One more time, that's GAD83 at cornell.edu. You reach out to me. And if you are interested in joining our organization, if you're a student or faculty, or anyone in the community, you can email me and we can tell you about the times. And if you're more just interested in attending any of our events, any of the, like, for instance, roundtables we will be having, if we bring any guest speakers to campus, we do have a KUSLAR list serve, an email list serve that you could be added to. And so I'll be happy to add you to that, and so there's ways to get involved for people depending on their interest, on their capacity, at all levels.
That sounds good. In fact, perhaps now I'm thinking, oh, I have to get on this listserv and perhaps do videos of some of these events.
Oh yes, I'll be sure to add you to it, Teresa.
So events. I think it's definitely time to turn to talking about what the plans are.
Yep. So I think one of the big priorities that we want to do for the coming year is to bring back Kuslar's famous newsletter. So Kuslar was well known for having a semesterly newsletter that would allow students, faculty, and community members to who are interested to get in touch with us and to write an article relevant to the topic or subject that the KUSLAR team decided on, and have that article appear in a larger newsletter that went throughout our KUSLAR networks. It would exist digitally, but we would also have a bunch of print copies made as well. And one of the best joys I've had as coming into this new position as the coordinator for KUSLAR has been looking through the archive of all of the old newsletter letters that date back to KUSLAR's inception. And I found ones as old as 1969, with some mention of Cold War shenanigans. So it's really important and impactful to hold that history, but to also see that you can play a part in that with being a part of somebody who is writing a newsletter, to do that. And I knew when I was recruiting for KUSLAR, as we had come out of hibernation, so to speak, this year, the thing that really caught a lot of students' eyes when I would be tabling outside Uris Hall with the Latin American Caribbean Studies program, was the newsletters. People saw that, and the colors, the design, and the potential content really spoke to them. And I think that is what has interested people. So that's going to be, I think, the first big thing that we try to bring back is a semesterly newsletter that community members can be a part of.
Great. I think this time I won't volunteer to help type. I hope you can find a younger typist.
I think we will be all right, Teresa. I think we'll figure that one out.
A lot more people can type now than used to.
Right. Beyond that, I was just lamenting with the KUSLAR students that as the semester was coming to a close, it seemed like a cornucopia of potential programming material had sort of presented itself. In no particular order, the passing of Henry Kissinger, whose legacy and foreign policy adventures or misadventures, cannot be separated from U.S. Latin American relations in any serious matter. Argentina's election of self-admitted anarcho-capitalist Javier Milei is definitely something that has interested people. And then, if anyone has been paying attention to politics in New York State, particularly in New York City, Mayor Adams has been fear-mongering a Republican about the migrant crisis, and having to potentially send migrants to different parts of New York State while passing the blame on Washington, D.C. and the Biden administration. And so there has brought up some very interesting questions that connect folks to migrant workers who might be in New York State, all the way to issues of instability in Latin America, and then right back to Washington, D.C., where these foreign policy decisions are being made that create this sort of instability. And of course, lastly, but certainly not least in terms of importance, is we have top tier Republican candidates for president like Ron DeSantis and former President Donald Trump talking about the prospect of invading Mexico with the military to get the drug cartels under control. Some very old-fashioned Monroe Doctrine era foreign policy, if you ask me. So there is plenty that CUSLAR will be interested in holding conversations and potential actions about in the near future.
Another little edit. Uh, yeah, wow. I hadn't even heard of that yet,
Mhm.
but thank you for mentioning it, because that's,
Yeah.
boy, can Republicans be bad news?
Oh, yeah.
Um, okay, so I guess you're saying there's going to be a lot of spreading the word about what's going on in the news,
Mhm.
including news that doesn't even seem to have made the alternative media,
Right.
let alone the mainstream media.
Right.
Um, but okay, spreading the news, what else?
No, I think that's a very good question. Beyond spreading the news, we want to also bring back community roundtables. So where we can have discussions that are open to community members to talk about these relevant issues. And I'm a big believer that any type of political education or discussion cannot be divorced or separated from political action as well. Otherwise, we're just doing self-congratulatory exercises, in my opinion. And so, I'm hoping that we can have these conversations in roundtables, but that with the conversations that we have, we can take on some type of advocacy, whether it's fundraising, whether it's organizing calls to local representatives or state representatives or federal representatives, or potentially even arranging trips for lobbying or any other type of thing that we can do to really put some oomph to the words that we're talking about. Because I think a critique that is often levied at organizations that talk about these issues, particularly that are setted in educational arenas like Cornell University or Ithaca College, is that there is a lack of praxis, so to speak. And so I am someone who is very interested in not you can get this education from classes. But what will make CUSLAR stand out is how do we apply that education into action to really follow through on our goals of regional solidarity.
Right, so that our work won't be just academic.
Correct.
Um, okay, so you're talking now about lobbying our government.
Yes.
which could be, well, and I suppose sometimes arranging trips for that.
Absolutely. I think it'd be, especially given that some of this buck passing that I've mentioned, uh, with Mayor Adams, for instance. The same could be attributed to Governor Hochul. And some of the rhetoric that I've heard from Governor Hochul about migrants, but also about, for instance, Palestinians or people who are expressing solidarity with Palestinians is very concerning, and I think would warrant a trip to Albany, or where have you. And I think the same could be said for our Republican Congressman, Representative Molinaro, who certainly could be doing a lot more to really exhibit regional solidarity. Because, as I mentioned, a lot of these calls for intervention in Latin America are coming from his party. And so, if this is a person that we, and I use we as the collective here within Tompkins County, have put into a position of power with the Republican Party. It's our responsibility to make sure that he does not mismanage that power in ways that could harm our siblings, brothers, sisters, and siblings in Latin America.
And I suppose there will be perhaps some films also.
Of course, yeah, it's an important part um, uh, of the political education. I know that it might be of interest to look, for instance, if we were going to hold an event on the legacy of Henry Kissinger, if we screened the Battle of Chile, to see exactly get a visual demonstration of the type of devastation that U.S. foreign policy can have on Latin America. But it's definitely something that we will be looking at as well in terms of the type of programming that we do is film screenings, whether they happen in, I'm interested if we're going to have a film screening at Cornell campus, for instance, that we have one in a more community-centric area, whether it be if we have a big event at Cinemapolis or the public library, or some other location like that, to make sure that we are making ourselves as accessible to the greater community as possible.
Sounds good. Yes, accessibility to the greater community. That has always been a feature of the work of CUSLAR.
Right.
And while we're talking about accessibility, and while we've said so much more about what the plans are, maybe it is time to repeat how to get in touch.
Absolutely. So, for those of you who are interested in either getting involved with CUSLAR, or following the work that we are doing, whether it's attending our programming, finding us on social media, or staying up to date on our newsletter, you can get in contact with me, the coordinator for CUSLAR, Jorge DeFendini, at GAD83 at cornell.edu. That's GAD83 at cornell.edu. From there, I'll be sure that you will not miss out on any of our events, that you'll be added to our listserv, and that you can be as plugged in and as engaged with the work that CUSLAR is doing as you see fit.
And I am guessing that there will be outreach to other community organizations.
Of course, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
yeah, maybe we can brainstorm a few right now.
Yeah, I mean, early on when I first got into this position, I reached out to the Latino Civic Association, as well as No Mas Lagrimas with Ana Ortiz. And I would love to continue building these inroads. So again, if you are somebody who either is a part of, belongs to, or leads a community organization in Tompkins County that you believe would be interested in collaborating with CUSLAR on either political education, whether that's learning about issues in U.S. Latin America, or acting on those issues with U.S. Latin America. Don't hesitate to reach out because we're always looking to build and expand our network to be as accessible as possible and to cultivate a community of, solidaristic allies here in the U.S.
Yes, well, I mentioned DSA, of course,
Mhm.
Democratic Socialists of America, but I could imagine now, just a couple of days ago, I was at an Amnesty International event,
That's right.
and they too have often dealt with Latin American situations and still do.
Absolutely.
So there's another, and oh my goodness, what did where was I the other day? Attending a fundraiser at the First Congregational Church
Mhm.
for a family
Oh, yes.
from
In
Latin America
in
living
the
there.
In the past, CUSLAR has had a very rich relationship with faith-based organizations. For those who do not know, we are based in Annabelle Taylor Hall, the building on Cornell's campus. That was where spirituality and meaning making and faith-based organizations are located. But in our history, we have worked closely with different churches and with different faith organizations who would either be providing sanctuary or connecting political refugees from different cases of fleeing violence or persecution. So that relationship is longstanding and historic within the KUSLAR network.
And I suppose you will also want relationships with political organizations.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and I think there's a whole lot to do in terms of reigniting a lot of these relationships, given that it's been some time for KUSLAR and other organizations that might have gone into hibernation with the pandemic. And so much of my first year has been sort of putting the word out that we are back and out and about. And so I'm going to continue to do that next year. And hopefully we can transition into acting on collaborations with a lot of these different political organizations and different organizations in general throughout the community. Because I
Well,
think there's definitely
yeah,
been a design. Mhm.
thank you, Jorge DeFendini, coordinator of CUSLAR, an organization that is, well, back in the saddle again. This has been Ithaca DSA Presents. I'm Theresa Alt. Thanks for watching.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3.